Easter Booktube, it's Carrie. Welcome back to my channel. I thought I would hop on today and talk about the 3 books that I read this week. The first book that I want to talk about is a young adult mystery thriller, and it's called Nobody Knows But You, and it's by Anica, Mrose, Rissi. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the author's name. This book is probably my favorite young adult thriller that I've read in a while. We follow our main character named Kayla, who is recounting a lot of her memories from summer camp. Sounds fun, right? Of course it's fun because she meets Lainey, who becomes her best friend, and Kayla and Lainey are pretty much attached at the hip until Lainey becomes involved in this on-again, off-again, volatile relationship with Jackson, who actually already has a girlfriend back home. We're getting to see an inside look into those relationships, and we're also trying to solve a murder because someone was murdered at summer camp as well. So I don't want to say a whole lot about who was murdered because I think the best way to find that out is actually to read the book. But I will say the way this book was written did a lot for the storyline because you really felt like you were in the camp environment. It really puts you in that place, and you felt like you were in on a lot of the inside jokes that were happening between Kayla and Lainey. The way the book is written actually did a lot to help put you in that mindset because it's written in kind of a mixed media format. We're seeing letters that Kayla is writing Lainey. We're seeing news reports. We're seeing text messages, police interrogations, court transcripts. So all of those things kind of help piece together the mystery in a really neat way. If you are interested in the young adult thriller mystery genre, I would highly recommend this book. And even if I'm wrong, it's pretty short. It won't waste a ton of your time. So even if you read it and you hate it, I'm sorry about that. But it's not very long, so it wouldn't be a huge loss of time. The second book that I read this week was You Are Not Alone by Greer, Hendricks, and Sarah Pekkanen. And typically I love these 2 authors. I've read The Wife Between Us and Anonymous Girl, and I loved both of those, but this one really missed the mark for me. I actually had to DNF it at about 65%. The premise of the book is we're following this girl named Shay who is obsessed with data, and so throughout the book she kind of spews a lot of interesting little factoids and random pieces of data that she collects in a little notebook of hers. Shay is living with a roommate who she's in love with, and that love is not reciprocated, and so when the new girlfriend moves in, Shay is being kind of forced out of the apartment. She also is at a temporary job, and she's kind of going through kind of a crisis in her life. She's kind of in limbo. Nothing too dramatic, but things are not going super well for her personally. And it's at this point in her life that she sees a woman who looks very beautiful, very put together. She sees her commit suicide on the subway platform. Now, this is what propels Shay into this weird friendship with these 2 sisters called the Moore sisters, who were friends, we think, with the young lady named Amanda who committed suicide. So these 2 Moore sisters, Cassandra and Jane, they befriend Shay, but we know that they have these ulterior motives. Cassandra and Jane are not necessarily what they appear. They are bent on revenge. We don't really know why. If this is just revenge on random men who have wronged women in their group, or if this is some sort of personal vendetta, we don't really know. The storyline didn't move fast enough for me to stay invested. We didn't really figure out what Jane and Cassandra's motivations were quick enough. The premise was kind of cool, but it was poorly executed. It did not keep my attention. I was pretty annoyed by Cassandra and Jane, so even though I liked the character of Shay and she was endearing, it just wasn't enough to keep me in the game. And I feel really bad because I'd already watched, I'm pretty sure, I couldn't find which video it was, but I'm pretty sure I already watched Dina at Books Yada Yada talk about how she didn't like this book. I'm pretty sure it was a book by these two authors, and I was like, oh yeah, great, you've already told me I won't like this, so I'll skip it. And then what do? I see it on Libby. It's got these two authors. I check it out, and I wasted a few hours of my life on this book. If you really love psychological thrillers, maybe this book will be great for you. I typically like this genre, but this book didn't have enough distinct characters for me. Some of the characters, including Cassandra and Jane, were pretty indistinguishable for me, and the plot relied too much on coincidences, and it just didn't give me enough of what the end game was going to be. I feel like the ending of this book probably has that great reveal, that great twist, which of course I looked up on BookTube just out of curiosity, but it just wasn't enough in the journey for me to stick around for that big reveal. The third book that I finished this week was The Diviners by Libba Bray, and this book was awesome. This is part of a series. I've been wanting to read it for a while, and I did do it as a buddy read with Holly over at Holly by Golly Books. And I will say, I don't know why, but I'd been putting it off, I guess because it's so thick and it is part of a series. So it was really nice to have someone else who was reading it with me, and at one point she passed me, so I had to catch up and finish this one up. But this book is a young adult paranormal mystery that has a lot of historical fiction elements in it, and it was amazing. The main character's name is Evie, and she is kind of like your typical spunky flapper from the 1920s. She doesn't quite fit in her hometown in Ohio, and her parents actually send her to her Uncle Will in New York City. And this works out really well for Evie because she has a best friend there named Mabel, and she also meets some people who are a little bit more accepting of her ways. Evie has a special gift. She is a diviner, so she has some supernatural powers. She can hold objects, and from those objects she can read things about your life. Now, this skill or this ability will come into play in a big way in this book because there are a series of murders that are occurring that have a supernatural twist to them. And the police will consult with her Uncle Will because Uncle Will happens to be the curator of a paranormal and supernatural museum that deals in occult objects. So we've got the supernatural, the paranormal, we've got occult in this book. We've got a lot of really neat historical fiction tidbits. They were able to work in things like the Chinese Exclusion Act and the eugenics movement in the United States, including like Better Baby or Better Family contest, which were a thing back in the day. And I just really enjoyed it. It was very atmospheric. It really puts you in this time period. And there were so many characters in this book, but I will tell you, it was so easy to keep track of because Libba Bray does a great job at creating these very distinct characters. We have Evie and her friend Mabel. this gentle giant named Jericho who works at Uncle Will's museum. We have a very charming pickpocket named Sam. There's a character named Memphis who has a healing ability. Theta and Henry are two performers who were stage performers, and they claim to be brother and sister, but they're not, and they are very cool. I will say the ending of this book to me was superb because a lot of your questions are answered, but there are just enough loose ends to perfectly set up the sequel, and the book leaves you wanting more. Even though this is a pretty good sized book for young adult, it doesn't feel slow. It's not confusing with all the characters. This book had like a Sherlock Holmes or the Alienist vibe to me, if you've ever seen that show with Dakota Fanning. I feel like it had that vibe, and I really loved this world that she created, and I can't wait to read the sequel. I'm not a huge sequel person, and I'm here for it. I'm into this one. So highly recommend this one. Not too bad this week, even though I had a DNF. I feel like I got some really good reading done. So I hope everyone is having a great Sunday, and if you've read any of these books or have any thoughts, please make sure you shoot a comment below. I am starting to prepare a little bit less for these videos, so if you've noticed and you're unhappy with that, I'm sorry, but I feel like in the past when I've spent a lot of time taking notes and preparing for the videos, they don't come out very well. They seem a little bit robotic, and I don't know. So I'm just going with it. I'm getting on the camera and talking about the books. So if you're into that, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.